Can I ask you this? Uh, Working in Mexico, um, uh, how how has that affected you over the last 5 years? You were in Afghanistan before, and then Mexico now. I mean, um, a lot of my colleagues from back then have thrived and done well, and they were there for many years. But I always felt this little little tingle of paranoia around my own head, covering narco. I was, told people don't put me on Facebook, don't take pictures of my house, don't do this, don't do that. I mean, how do you this is kind of a journalism question for correspondence, but how do you deal with that anxiety, that feeling that you're being watched or that something bad could happen to you?
I think I check that anxiety and that fear in some ways because the privilege of being a U.S. correspondent or citizen, someone for the is a certain protection I think that affords you. It's very, these ultimately a lot of these folks are businessmen, and it's bad for business to attack or kill someone like me or someone like you. And I think I feel that privilege more acutely when I look at what happens to my Mexican colleagues and the ways in which they don't have that protection, neither from their own government nor any sort of understanding of the importance of media and the sanctity of a reporter's job. So for myself, I think initially I check my whatever sort of self-pity or anxiety I might be inclined to feel. And at the same time, I understand that, like, look, if you're going to do this work, there's certain costs you have to be willing to bear. Now, nobody's making me do this work. And if I said I didn't want to do it, nobody would blink an eye. The Times, and I think most journalist outfits are good about that. And at the same time, you learn to manage it. You learn to process and sort of squeeze that anxiety out through logistics, through making a concerted effort to be cautious and safe and thoughtful, understand exactly what you're getting into, the different ways and means in which you can protect yourself. But of course, I mean, I think your real question is a question most of us are always loath to respond, which is, what's the impact? How does it affect you? And yeah, I don't particularly like to answer or engage that question, not because you asked anything wrong, but just my own personal predilections, because I've seen colleagues here who've been killed, who've paid far steeper prices than like a night of bad sleep or feeling high strung or nightmares. Like those things pale in comparison to when I think the real cost that folks that, I know, a lot of us know in Mexico and elsewhere have paid.
Yeah, and so many of them have. I was sensitive to that. That our many of colleagues in Mexico have had lives lost and all sorts of things happen. I was just wondering. I found the place. My question was more focused on. I found it slightly paranoid. The Mexico environment versus Iraq, covered, or Afghanistan, or all sorts of other places. In the sense that that you go to a place and there'd be no other journalists there, and you'd be covering a beheading or death or something, and you didn't see colleagues there. It was an odd place to work, which was more my question, not whether you had more, PTSD, more kind of fear than other places. I mean, because, oh my God, Mosul, Iraq, all these other places are difficult, but Mexico and Honduras and all these places are kind of unique. And I think sometimes our colleagues around the world don't understand how odd they are to work in.
Sure.
And that's what I was asking. How odd are these places to work in?
Yeah, it's surreal. It's like Afghanistan, Iraq, I worked in both, and they're surreal. They're otherworldly because you're not only in a place that is so inherently different from that which you come from or know, it's also in the midst of war, which is also surreal. And to make calculations and understand the way that one thing affects the other is, it's like learning a new language in some ways, or understanding a whole new world, with different rules and different bylaws. And in Mexico too, is there's these strange moments where you find yourself in the middle of, as you said, a small pueblo, and people are reeling from some horrendous act of violence, and like that's unlike anything that you'd see in many places, a beheading or some sort of just grisly execution, that sort of plumbs the depths of human depravity. And that's just, for that context, that's messaging. That is cartel messaging. I'm killing this guy in this way, so how I feel about this thing. And then you look at it as a market, because they don't have a functioning regular legal market, and so they regulate with violence. You break a contract, there's violence. You want to perform a hostile takeover, that's a violent, actual hostile takeover. And adapting to that reality, it's not like I live that reality daily, but when you do go into it to write about it, it's a strange and bizarre dynamic, because we're not of that. So it takes time to try and understand it and to grasp what it means, especially for the people who are living there. And none of that is happening at their behest. They're just suffering under that sort of dynamic. And I think those are the people that I most tend to gravitate towards. The people who are trapped in those situations, not of their own volition, but because there's simply no other option for them.
Yeah, no, yes, exactly.